Cal Raleigh just had one of the best catcher seasons ever. But what more does he have to do in order to get himself into Cooperstown one day? We'll answer that and more here on Mailbag Monday. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Monday, December 1st, 2025. You're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. My name is Titan Gonzalez, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Colby Patnode. We're two lifelong Mariners fans who've been covering the team for over half a decade. And on today's show, we're going to open up the mailbag like we do here every single Monday and answer some of your Mariners questions. Before we do, though, I want to shout out our title sponsor today, Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. All right, kicking us off here on Mailbag Monday is Henry, who has a banger of a question here. Cal Raleigh is sitting at 18.8 B-WAR and 22.9 F-WAR through his first 5 seasons. If he were to post that same value for the next 5 years, what do you think of his Hall of Fame case? Side question, how much more would he need to post to be in the GOAT catcher conversation? Ooh. All right, so let's start with the first part of your question. So it's very interesting because I don't really know how much WAR actually factors into this conversation, how much it matters for this conversation, because there are 18 catchers in the Hall of Fame right now. It's a very exclusive club. But if we're going off of WAR, whether it's B-WAR or F-WAR, those are not the 18 most valuable catchers in baseball in the history of the game. The F-WAR average of the 18 guys in the Hall of Fame right now is 53 flat. The B-WAR average of the 18 guys in the Hall of Fame is 50.2. Now, there are some guys that have recently been left off the ballot after their first year even, that maybe they didn't get to at least one of those averages, but they definitely have exceeded some of the guys that are in the Hall right now, like Russell Martin. He fell off the ballot after his first year, despite putting up 54.5 F-WAR. That's more than Joe Mauer. That's one full win more than Joe Mauer. He, though, only put up 38.6 B-WAR. So pretty significant disparity there. And he's about 12 wins off of the, B-WAR average. Brian McCann, another big disparity here, but he put up 52.1 F-WAR, only 31.6 B-WAR though, but he fell off the ballot after 1 year. Jason Kendall fell off the ballot after 1 year, despite putting up 41.7 B-WAR and 36.5 F-WAR. Jorge Posada fell off after 1 year with 42.7 B-WAR and 40.9 F-WAR. All four of those guys, at the very least, exceeded, a couple of guys that are currently in the Hall of Fame right now. So I think just kind of going off of that, I think it would be safe to say that, like, if Cal wants to get in, if he wants to feel semi-safe in getting in, he probably needs to get it to about 50 in both B-WAR and F-WAR. Couple of guys that we should keep an eye on, though, in that regard specifically, Buster Posey and Yadier Molina. Kind of feels like those are the two modern Hall of Famers, future Hall of Famers. Posey posted a 57.9 F-WAR in his career, 45 flat B-WAR. And Molina posted a 55.6 F-WAR and a 41.7 B-WAR in his career. So those are the two guys that I would be looking at specifically as far as Cal goes, especially if he's not going to get to 50 in both F-WAR and B-WAR, which seems very likely, especially considering, your the premise of your question here. Like, if he does what he's done over the last 5 years for the next 5 years, so 18.8 B-WAR over, or times 2 would be 37.6, 22.9 F-WAR times 2 would be 45.8. So that's like on the cusp. But again, I'm not really sure how much WAR matters. And also, it's just kind of a different era where we kind of have to grade, especially catching, on a curve, because more and more guys are, more and more catchers are not catching later on in their careers. Like they're switching positions. They're going to full-time DH roles and, playing first base more. So like how much does that also factor into the conversation? And then obviously with Cal, there's accolades. There's an aura to Cal that just like some of the other guys that we mentioned just didn't have in their careers. So how much does that also matter? So yeah, again, I'm not really sure how much WAR matters here, but if we're just strictly going off of that, I think he has to at least break 50 in one of them.
I think, kind of the hidden, disingenuous part of the question, not that it was intended this way, is just that you're counting Cal's debut year in this discussion, and he was a below replacement level player in in that year by both metrics. He was minus 0.5 in BWAR, for example, and obviously that greatly affects the overall value. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, if we look at what he's done the last 4 years since he's been a full-time player, it's pretty much been a walking four-win player, and then he had this 9-win season with F-WAR, and I believe it was 7.5 with B-WAR. So it's kind of like, hey, how about if the next 5 years look like the last 4 years? And I know that's not easy math, but then obviously that changes the formula a little bit. When you look at who's in the Hall of Fame, who's not, like you said, there's 18 guys in there. The top 11 B-WAR catchers of all time are all in the Hall of Fame, and they all have above 50. So if you get to above 50 in B-WAR, you feel pretty good. And if you're above 50 in B-WAR, you're probably going to be above 50 in F-WAR, because very clearly when you look at the discrepancy here in the WARs, Fangraphs places more value on the catcher defense than Baseball Reference does. And this is why WAR is kind of a tough, it's a tough thing to figure, especially on catchers, because so much of their value is defensive. And as much as we can go back and assign, value to Johnny Bench back in the day, we just didn't have the defensive metrics that we do now, and we weren't grading them. So we're really guessing a lot on the defensive side of those things. And I think when you look at Cal and you kind of, as we get smarter, I think that if he is around 45, he'll probably get in eventually, because one thing we have to remember is narratives also matter. And Cal Raleigh has a platinum glove. Cal Raleigh set the major league record for home runs by a catcher. He set the major league record for home runs by a switch hitter. He hit more home runs than King Griffey Jr. He's one of currently only 8 players to hit 60 home runs in a season, and he did it as a catcher. I think those things are going to carry some real weight with the voters when we get there. Now we're at least, 10 years away from Cal being on the ballot, because it's 5 years after you retire, and Cal's not going to retire anytime soon. So there's a long way to go, and maybe those things get overlooked. But I think if Cal is just has another 3 years of a 5-win player just consistently, and then he maybe drops back to a 3-win player because he catches a little bit less, he's going to put himself in that conversation. As for whether or not he'll get in, I don't know, because again, it's really tough to know how WAR is going to grade out here. But there are some narrative things that help his case. The 60 home runs helps. The platinum glove helps. The winning the home run derby helps. Like, all these things are part of a narrative you can build at the end of his career that gets him there. And then obviously a big part of that too is and he was, a great offensive catcher, and he caught a lot of innings early in his career. So how long could his career have been if he was a first baseman, et cetera, et cetera? So there's going to be a lot of narrative things that help him in this conversation. But yeah, it feels like he has to get to 50 in B-WAR for me to have a really good shot of getting in. And then we'll see how much the narrative really, hammers this home. And one thing to remember here is that there are different Hall of Fame cases. There are peak Hall of Fame cases. There are consistent Hall of Fame cases, like Craig Biggio, just consistently good for 15 years. Whereas a guy like Sandy Koufax was elite for 6 years, and that was pretty much his entire career. And he gets in just because he was so dominant over a certain stretch. And so sure, Cal kind of has an opportunity to do both, or at least one of those things, where he could be an elite player for a 6-year stretch, or he could just be like a really good, consistent catcher who hits a ton of home runs. And that's the other thing too. When you look at the Russell Martins and the Jorge Posadas, they were really good players, obviously, and they probably deserve more Hall of Fame clout than they got. but Cal makes headlines because Cal hits homers, and home runs are always going to
Right.
carry the day for offensive players. And, right now, if Cal hits 30 home runs next year, he's going to be in the top 30 all time in catcher home runs. So, that is going to be a big driving point for him. So if he can win another Gold Glove or if he can make, 3 or 4 all-star teams and have a couple, like if he has a couple more 40 home run seasons, I think the narrative is going to drive a big part of his value. And then we'll see where he ends up on the WAR front.
Now, as far as the GOAT conversation goes, I don't think there's much of a conversation to be had there really with Cal, like, especially because he started his career. So like he began his major league career at what, 25 years old?
Yeah.
I think just because of like time, really, he's not going to be able to, unless, he continues to be an MVP candidate for the next.
If he has 4 consecutive 8-win seasons, then maybe he's in the conversation.
Yeah, sure.
Johnny Bench has the record for catchers on Baseball Reference, and B-WAR, it's about 75.5, I believe.
Yeah.
So obviously Cal, needs 60 wins to get there. And let's say he has 10 years left in the league. That's 6 wins a year is quite a lot for a guy who's just gonna eventually his body is gonna break down from just the sheer volume of the wear and tear and the grind, like it does for all catchers. So I would say it's very unlikely, based on strictly on WAR. It's very unlikely that Cal could get into that conversation. But is there a path where we could be talking about Cal as a top 10, 15 catcher of all time? Yeah, there is. So
yeah. I just like, could Cal get to a point where we can actually make the argument against Johnny Bench, regardless of WAR, just, talking about eras and, how much more is demanded of guys in today's game and all of that. Right. Could he get to that point? I don't know. Cause like that would require him to clearly surpass like Buster Posey, guys like that. Right. And I don't know if Cal will ever get there.
Right. It kind of depends on who you look at as his contemporaries. Posey pretty solidly the era before, but they tend to get lumped together. Certainly more a contemporary than Johnny Bench or whoever else might be in consideration for that. But I think it's very unlikely he can get there. By the way, the major league record for home runs by catcher is Mike Piazza at 412, I think. So Cal's at I want to say 150-ish. So if Cal plays 10 more years and he averages 27 home runs a year, then he'll probably be the all-time home run champion. But that's a lot of work to do for a guy who's already, approaching 30 and has a lot of mileage on him. So we'll see if he can get there or not, but I think it's very unlikely he actually does get to the top of that. But could he be one of those players who, 20 years from now, maybe 30 years from now, we're looking around going like, it was really good. Cal Raleigh, like that guy was something else. And he's in the discussion. He's, but I don't think he's actually going to get to the top of that conversation.
Yeah. Again, I just looked it up. He made his debut at 24 years old. Obviously that year was also a wash. So really he didn't start being the Cal Raleigh that we know and love until about 25, 26 years old. I just don't think there's enough time.
If he does anything close to this again next year, I think that changes the narrative quite a bit, because now it would be 2 years of like one of the best offensive. And at that point, it's not just a one-off thing. It's like, is this guy in the conversation for the best offensive catcher of all time?
Yeah.
But is he going to do anything close to this again next year? Probably not.
It's hard to see, but also it was hard to see him breaking Mickey Mantle's record, and it was hard to see him breaking Griffey's record, and it was hard to see him getting to 60. So who knows? But with like the World Baseball Classic also coming up, like he's going to even have more wear and tear just going into next season. There's a lot stacked against Cal, but we'll see if he can overcome it all. I mean, I doubted Cal's ability to get to, certain thresholds over the course of this year, and he exceeded my expectations in pretty much every single regard. So I've learned not to doubt Cal Raleigh. All right. We will answer more of your questions here in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel and Doer. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift, a receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment as live spreads and money lines adjust instantly, and player props update as guys heat up. You can also bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. And even if you're looking at the bigger picture and want to bet on who will win it all, you can do that as well. Right now, the Seahawks have the second best championship odds in the entire league at plus 850. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Sailors, I got to tell you, I love a good pair of jeans, but I'm also very particular about my jeans. You know, I need the fit to be right. If they're blue jeans, especially, there's a very particular shade of light blue I'm looking for. And of course, I need them to be comfortable, right? I mean, that's the name of the game. And well, I just got my first pair of jeans from Doer, and they check off every single box. I got the Performance Denim Slims as well as a Pure Pima Vintage Pocket Tee, and they're both getting added to my regular rotation. Doer jeans have 5 times the stretch of traditional denim. They're antibacterial, meaning your jeans stay fresh longer so you can wear more and wash less. And they're made with CoolMax, which regulates your body temperature and wicks moisture. And Doer combines classic jeans wear with the kind of comfort and performance you get from athletic wear. So it's the best of both worlds. And Doer are pioneers of blending technical innovation with everyday clothing. They invented the original performance denim. So simply put, Doer makes the world's most comfortable pants without having to sacrifice style. Trust me, once you try these, they'll be your go-to. Get a pair for yourself or as an amazing holiday gift. Go now to shopdoer.com/lockedonseattle. You'll get 15% off your first order. That's shop DUER.com/lockedonseattle for 15% off. Shopdoer.com/lockedonseattle. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen, and also thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. It's Mailbag Monday. Let's get back into your questions. Ethan wants to know, which Mariners minor leaguers are you most excited to track this season? Would love to hear about some of the non-obvious ones like Emerson or Las Montes, looking for some dark horse deep cut prospects. Thanks.
I'll give you one that I think is at least dark horse adjacent. Griffin Hugus. You guys remember him?
Yep.
He was the 3rd round pick, and everybody was kind of like, who is this guy? But there are some Bryce Miller-ishness to his profile. And yeah, he's a 3rd round pick. The Mariners clearly think he can start. There's a question about whether or not he just hops into the bullpen and moves pretty quick. But Griffin Hugus is a guy that I'd like to see start, and I think there's a pretty decent chance he starts the year in Everett. He might be Kate Anderson's teammate in Everett, but maybe Modesto. It's really not that huge of a deal. And then I guess the other guy I would keep an eye on, well, 2 guys. They both happened to pitch in the state of Arizona last year, and they were both draft picks of the Mariners. Which one do you want, Ty? I assume you're going to take one of these 2 guys.
I'm actually not. So you can take either one.
All right. Hintz and Kelly. The 2 relievers from Arizona and Arizona State, respectively. Kelly, much more of a high upside reliever who could move very, very quickly. He throws 98 to 100 from a low arm slot, pretty good slider. He's really interested. And then Hintz is the guy who very Paul Sewaldy. I don't remember which round he was drafted in. Kelly, I believe, was a 6th rounder.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and then Hintz was like a 12th rounder or 13th rounder.
13th rounder, yeah. But both of those guys could move pretty quick. So you want to see how they look. But to me, like the dark horse, assuming we're not talking about the Nicky Beckers or the Jorge Bautistas, like board type of guys, Griffin Hugus is a guy I'm kind of, very intrigued by based on what we learned about him after the draft.
Yeah, I'll go with another 2025 draftee. I'm going to go with Korbyn Dickerson, the 5th round pick out of Indiana, outfielder, high bat speed, post extreme exit velocities. We're going to see some impressive nukes hit by Dickerson. We're also going to see some web gems, I think, posted by Mariners miners. But the thing to really watch out for there is like, can he actually hit with consistency? Can he actually pick up spin? Can he just actually find success against advanced pitching, right? Despite the high bat speed, he's had some issues catching up to velo. So can he actually do that in the minors? We'll see if the Mariners implement some tweaks here with him. But he's a fun, toolsed up dude. So like he's definitely going to be on the highlight reel. Next question here from Transactional Healing. What's a realistic stat line and comp for Cole Young in year 2, assuming he wins the strong side platoon at second base? I don't know, 245, 320, 400.
Yeah, I think Cole's going to have to hit for some average if he wants the on base to be above average. So I think, 250, 260, right around that 320 range, and then hopefully around the 400 slug mark. Yeah, I think he could, he could be a guy who hits 280. He could be a guy who posts 350 on base. He could slug a little. I don't think he's ever going to be like a 450 slug guy, but yeah, to me, Cole Young is eventually going to be a really solid 3-win player because he's going to hit, he's going to make enough contact. He's a good enough hitter. He's going to put the ball in play a lot and, mostly find a lot of base hits. He's going to hit some doubles. He's going to draw his walks. He's going to play solid defense. I think he's ultimately a pretty safe bet to be a 3-win player for a lot of years, but I don't think there's a ton of upside here. So we'll see what it looks like. But in 2025, in his second crack at big league regular playing time in this scenario, I think if he hits 250, I think if he, post a league average or better on base, and if he slugs right around 400, I think you take that, and that's a pretty good player. Hopefully the defense is better than it was last year. There's really no reason to believe it won't be. It's just last year he was just playing second base for a majority of the time for the first time of his career. And also the arm was just dreadful. It was awful, which is not something that was ever a part of his profile. So I think just naturally with more reps, he'll be a better defensive second baseman. And I think if he does that, if he's an average second baseman defensively, if he hits 250, 320, 380 to 400 with the slug, then I think he's probably a 2.5 win player next year. And it's a good season to build on.
All right, next question here from Aiden. There's been a lot of talk about how a potential 2027 lockout might affect this year's free agency market. If some players who might typically get 2 to 3 year offers are only getting 1 year offers, is that a market you could see the Mariners being active in? I think you've talked a little bit about it in regards to Gino, and was wondering how likely you think that scenario is and what you think of other potential free agent ads in that mold. So it's kind of the Kevin Mather free agents, coming to the Mariners with hat in hand type of thing. Yeah. That's I think that's kind of what you're talking about here. Would the Mariners try and take advantage of that? Maybe. I think it's specific for certain free agents. Cause I mean, like Pete Alonso was a guy that maybe you could have talked to about a 1 year deal last year, and they didn't even explore that. So I don't know. But like Gino, like if his market crashes to the point of him just having to entertain 1 year deals, then yeah, I could see the Mariners circling back on that, depending on what else they do between now. Like I would think that Gino scenario would probably happen in February or March. So the Mariners have probably done more heavy lifting by that point, or at least they've tried, and maybe they've swung and missed on some things. But yeah, I could see that happening. But like in general, I don't know. Cause again, like there have been other times where it's made sense for them to go do that. Matt Chapman is another example of that. And they haven't even explored it really.
Yeah. Mark Simeon a few years ago was an opportunity to do that. Yeah.
Before he signed with Toronto.
Right. There are some guys that make sense, none more than Gino, just because of the position he plays and your familiarity with him. It's really tough to say how the looming lockout will affect free agents because, I guess you could easily say, well, if there's a salary cap or whatever, then players want to get their contracts now so they get grandfathered in. But teams are also going to want to see how that looks. And so they might not be as willing to give, multi-year contracts to some of these guys, but players might also look at it and be like, well, if there's going to be a salary cap, then there's definitely going to be a salary floor. That's the only way we would allow a salary cap. So when teams are forced to spend more, I could actually make more by getting out on the free agent market next year. But obviously, there's a lockout, then that means you're not going to know where you're going to play until, for some players, March, maybe April, even depending on how long the lockout goes. So the lockout really is a great X factor here. And I just don't think we right now have any ability to predict how that's going to impact the free agent market. If it does impact the free agent market in a way where good players are suddenly looking for short-term deals, could the Mariners take advantage of that? I mean, they should try to. It's just, are there a lot of players where that makes sense? Not really. Not outside of Gino. Like the Kyle Tuckers, they're going to sign their 8-year deals. The Bo Bichette's are going to sign their 8-year deals. They're not going to fall there. It's the guys who are looking at 2 or 3-year deals or 4-year deals who might be willing to take a 1-year deal. And it's usually guys who are coming off of a season that wasn't incredible, but wasn't bad. And I think like the guy who kind of comes to mind right away is a Zach Gallen type. Well, you already have your 5 starters. And maybe if you trade Luis, maybe Gallen makes some sense, but even then, So it's just kind of one of those things where I think Gino is the guy that fits the mold that you're talking about here, and his familiarity with Seattle and all that definitely gives them an advantage if it does fall that way. But other than him, I don't really see a ton of options like that out there on the free agent market this year. That makes sense for Seattle and where their roster is currently at. And I just can't pretend to know how the lockout is going to affect these guys, because basically any argument you could say as to why players might be willing to take a shorter deal because of the lockout, I could easily counter it with why they might just be willing to, take the chance that they're not going to get salary capped. Like if Kyle Tucker signs an 8-year deal and then next year there's a salary cap, it's not going to affect Kyle Tucker at all. He's going to get his money one way or another. So I just, it's too muddy for me to predict how this will affect some players, but Gino really is the ideal, like, hey, I wanted 3 years, not really getting it from somebody. Do I maybe take a 1-year deal because you're familiar with him, because he plays the position you need? Like if it happens to Alex Bregman again, the Mariners should be all over that, but I really doubt it's going to.
Yeah. As far as Gino goes, it's like I've said in the past, like third base sucks around the league. And as soon as Alex Bregman flies off the market, or as soon as teams realize like, hey, we're not getting Bregman, all eyes are going to be on Gino. I just have a very hard time seeing Gino's market crash, even with how bad he was in those final 2 months of the season, just because of the state of third base around the league.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's super realistic that that's going to happen, that Gino is just going to get to a point where he's still unsigned, at a point in free agency where it makes sense for him to take a 1-year deal, where it makes sense for the Mariners to circle back on him. Mm-hmm. But we'll see.
Right. And again, to be fair, like nobody would have predicted that happening to Pete Alonso or Alex Bregman or Matt Chapman, when those happened to them. And we didn't really get to that point until middle of January, before we're like, oh, maybe these guys are willing to take a shorter term deal. So maybe somebody like that will pop, but it's just tough to predict right now.
All right, we will answer a couple more of your questions here in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you once again by Gametime. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. And with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Gametime app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Gametime, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. Pull up the app and the layout makes it so simple to scroll through matchups and compare seat views. Pick a game, tap a section, and have your tickets locked in within minutes. No confusion, no hunting for fine print. Prices include fees up front, which I love because there are no last second surprises at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets in every match, concert, or event with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go, Gametime. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, we have a Patreon. It's called Control the Zone. And on there, we talk Mariners, Seahawks, all that good stuff. For more information, go to patreon.com/Control the Zone. Link in the description of this episode. Let's get back into your questions here on Mailbag Monday. Aaron wants to know, following up on Wednesday's discussion on the good and the bad of trading our rotation arms, can you talk about the benefits and disadvantages of extending them? How many years in AAV would you give them? So obviously Luis is out. Like we're not open
Luis
to extending Luis.
Do you remember back when the Phillies had their super rotation in the early 2010s, and it was like the four aces and Joe for Joe Blanton? Like Luis is Joe Blanton in this scenario. No disrespect to Luis, but like whenever we get questions about the future of the Mariners rotation, assume that Luis is not involved in that conversation, unfortunately. So of the four guys, I mean, obviously Logan Gilbert should be the priority because he's closest to free agency. So we've talked about this. I think the Logan Webb, comp is a good one to build off.
That was 5 and 90.
You're right. And so I think around 5 and 100 is probably a pretty good place to start. With Logan, I would do that. Obviously you'd have to do quite a extensive look at the elbow and all that to see where it's at. Understanding that you're probably going to miss, he's probably going to miss significant time at some point with an elbow injury, as most pitchers are. But, the best sign of a future elbow injury is a current elbow injury, and Logan's kind of pitching through that. So assume that you're going to miss a year of that with Tommy John, and maybe there's a 6-year option that's very favorable to Logan, but it only activates if he doesn't miss more than 150 games with
there might be incentives injury. Based on innings pitched,
which they did with Felix back when he signed his second extension. So keep an eye on that. I think 5 and 100 is about right with Logan. I think next up is probably Bryan Woo over even Kirby, even though he has another year of club control. I think Woo is a guy that, because of his injury history, might be more willing to take a team-friendly deal in regard. Now, you get 4 years of Woo, and you can kind of do the math on the ARB, and assuming that he makes, $4 to $5 million next year in ARB1, he makes, let's say, 10 like Logan's making this year in ARB2, and then the next year he makes, let's just 15 for easy math. That means over the next 4 years, he's going to end up making $32 million. I think he got a bonus this year of about $2 million.
Yeah, he was in that that bracket or whatever. Right. The thing that they put
the
in
pre-ARB, like if you finish top 5 in a Cy Young voting or whatever, in your pre-ARB, you get a bonus, and he got one of the bigger bonuses. I think it was about $2 million. So over the next 4 years, he's going to make about $32 million. And then you kind of go, okay, what's a free agent year of Bryan Woo like? When you look at his track record and the year he's coming off of, he's probably going to say $25 million. So I think if you're looking at, like, for him, 5 years, $55 million. And maybe because of the injury history and because he's so far away from free agency, maybe where you win back some money on this is you go like 6 years at like $60 million. And so, you basically get an extra free agent year for $10 million essentially.
Right.
So I think that's probably Woo, probably around 10 to 12 million because he's so far away from free agency and because of his injury history. I think that's probably a good place to go. And then Kirby's probably next. And again, you kind of do the math on what he's going to make in his ARB years. And then you figure a free agent year for George Kirby is probably going to be worth 20 to 25 million, probably 25 to 30. So let's just say 25. So just kind of build it out like that. What is Kirby making this year in ARB? Do you remember?
I think it's like 5.4.
Right. So again, if he follows very similar to Logan Gilbert, 5, 10, 5.4, 10, 15 again. You figure 30 million and then 25 million for a free agent year. So 455, 460.
And then you just keep stacking those 25s.
For however many years. So ultimately I think, and then Kirby has to want to sign it. So I think Kirby's probably going to be the most expensive because I think Kirby is the least invested in being in Seattle long term. Now, that's just speculation on my part. Don't know. But
And that's not to say that he's not invested.
No. It's just that, like, Kirby always feels to me like a guy who wants to go back east. He's from New York. He's talked about how he'd love to pitch for the Red Sox and the Yankees and all of that. And certainly he'll be a valuable asset when he does hit free agency. I just think that Kirby's the least likely to sign an extension of any of the guys. And so that's kind of what I'm basing my valuation on. And then Bryce is the year he's coming off of. I think he's probably the best bargain you can get. And I think you might be able to get him for like 5 or 6 years at about 8 million to 10 million AAV. I think that's probably about what you would look for. So yeah, I think Logan's probably the best at like 5 and 100. And then Woo, I think if you give Woo a 6-year extension, I think you probably get him for 60, 65 million. Kirby, I would say for a 5-year extension, you're probably looking at, he's probably going to want what Logan's going to get at least, even though Logan's a little bit better. So 5 and 100 for him. And then for Miller, I think it's probably, you're looking at like 6 and 50, 6, somewhere in that range, 7 and 60, somewhere in there. So yeah, I would rank them in priority. I would go Logan 1, Woo 2, Kirby still 3, Miller 4.
Scott wants to know, what do you think would be the contract details? So AAV, years, opt-outs, blah, 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 for re-signing Jorge Polanco. Yeah, I still don't really know what Polo's going to get. I mean, we took a stab at it in our offseason plan. We did 2 years, 14 million per, so 28, and then a $2 million buyout on a 3rd-year option. So he's guaranteed to make $30 million. That option would be for about 15 mil if he accepted it. Or did we decide if it was like a player option or a mutual option? I don't think we did. Whatever.
Let's call it mutual.
Yeah. That's the ballpark that we kind of think he might land.
Yeah. I think it's possible that a team might be, I don't want to say desperate, but like they might be like willing to give him a 4th year guaranteed to make sure they land him. We've heard like Pittsburgh sniffing around here. I don't know why Polo would want to play in Pittsburgh, but maybe there is a team like that, maybe not Pittsburgh, specifically, but that is like, look, we need to make a bit of a splash, which if you're saying we need to make a splash and it's signing Jorge Polanco as your splash, no disrespect to Polo, he had a very good year. You have bigger issues to worry about if Polo is your splash move. But I could see a team doing that and being like, here's a 4th year. And at that point, I think if I'm Seattle, I'm out. I'm not going 4 guaranteed years. I think ultimately where you settle in pretty nicely is 3 years, somewhere in that $12 to $15 million range, depending on how, fierce the competition is. Maybe it's 16, 17, $18 million. I don't see any way he's getting 20 million a year. I really don't think it's likely he's going to get a 4th guaranteed year. I think a 3rd guaranteed year puts you in the driver's seat to sign him. But there are so many questions about his health and, is what he did last year repeatable, even though it's been what he's done a majority of his career. That 2024 is still real, and he still missed time this year, and he still couldn't hit right-handed for a large chunk of the season. And, he still has all those leg injuries that he's dealt with over the last 4 or 5 years. So there's a lot of questions surrounding Polo. No doubt he's coming off of a good year. I think ultimately, if I had to guess, he's going to land 2 to 3 guaranteed years, and it's going to be worth between, I would say, 12 to 16-ish million dollars a year. That would be my hunch.
All right. So tomorrow is Top 5 Tuesday. In the last couple of weeks, we've messed up and not actually spun the wheel here on the show. So we're going to rectify that now and actually spin the wheel this time. It is Colby's turn to tackle a topic on the helm. So let's spin that for him right now and see what he's going to be talking about tomorrow. And around it goes. We added some new options on here, by the way. Okay, very simple here. Top 5 trade targets for the Mariners. All right, it's time for me to spin the Ed Helms now for my topic tomorrow after Colby gets done with his top 5 trade targets for the Mariners this winter. I'll be tackling top 5 bullpen entrances in all of baseball. All right, there we go. So stuff like Edwin Diaz, Trumpet, Yon Duran, think those guys might be making an appearance on tomorrow's list. All right, well, that's what you have looking forward to tomorrow. Top 5 trade targets for the Mariners this winter and the top 5 bullpen entrances on Top 5 Tuesday. That's going to do it for our show today, though. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For Colby Patnode, I'm Titan Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Titan Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11, that's CPAT11. We're also on Blue Sky. You can follow me at TDG, Colby at MLB Colby, and the show at Locked On Mariners. You can also find us on Instagram at Locked On Mariners. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.